Welcome, everybody. We are delighted to have you here this morning. My name is Jason Lane, and I serve as the Dean of the School of Education at the University at Albany. This is our weekly community conversations, and today we're focusing on career planning for the new normal. And there is no doubt that the pandemic is issuing in a new normal. I don't think any of us have the crystal balls to fully know what that means going forward, but there's no doubt that we need to be thinking about how careers will be evolving over time and how to help individuals prepare for those. So we're delighted to have you here with us to talk about this really important topic today. This is part of a weekly series that we have been doing since the beginning of the pandemic. It emerged out of our effort to create remoteed.org, which is an online clearinghouse of resources to support parents and teachers and others in navigating the learning of and engagement for students and others in a remote environment. And in part, this has leveraged the University of Albany's deep engagement in online learning for now a number of years, including us being ranked as one of the top 10 in the country for the provision of online graduate education. And so we have been working closely with our K-12 partners to navigate this new space and help us all collectively figure out what it means to be remote learning. And obviously learning leads to career development. And so we're excited to be able to talk with our experts today about how this all will be evolving. Next slide. I am joined today by one of our alums and a good friend and colleague, Dr. Susan Perkins, who I am delighted is here with us today. She has really been an expert and a leader in New York State in working through career development in a number of ways, including working with a number of organizations across New York State and SUNY and helping many of the most economically and academically challenged in our state find new career paths moving forward. And so delighted to have her here with us moderating. I'll turn over to her in 1 second. Before that, just a couple of notes of what's coming up this summer. Next slide. I would encourage you, if you haven't, to check out remoteed.org. There are now over 1,000 free educational resources available there. This is a curated list of resources that our faculty have been going through for the past several weeks now to make sure that we're providing high quality opportunities for student learning. We know that many are being inundated by the opportunities on the web, and our hope with Remote ED is that we've created a curated resource to help them navigate this space, organized by both grade level and subject. Coming up next, next week we have Leading in the Times of Change series, which is a collaboration with the Capital Region BOCES, looking at ways in which education across cradle to career is navigating this new space. And we are, next week's topic will be the pandemic preparedness for the new environment. We'll keep going there, Jerry. We have upcoming summer camps. I would encourage you to check them out on the Remote ED website. We are trying to do some virtual camps this year. Our long-standing Capital District Writing Project Young Writers Workshop will be happening July 13th through 17th. Focused on kids from K to high school, working with them on a range of projects from sort of creating their own planets and worlds to helping those who are maybe going into college, write college essays. So if you're interested in that work, encourage you to check those out. They'll be happening July 13th through 17th. And we've also partnered with our New York State Master Teachers to develop a set of virtual learning camps focused on STEM-related subject matter to help kids continue their learning across the summer. Moving forward. And so I encourage you to check those out. Those are from 1 hour to 3 days. Again, they're virtual and they are fun and engaging opportunities just to help kids at all levels continue their STEM learning. And so there'll be great opportunities for children moving forward. So that brings us to the panel we have today. And I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Susan Perkins to set it up and introduce our panelists.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lane. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I remember, I think that was maybe 10 years ago when I was one of your students. And And I remember when you were first coming on as a professor, that the buzz was that he is really hard and really strict. He is not only known in this country, but internationally, and you better come correct if you're coming to his class. So here we are so many years later, and it's such an honor and privilege to work with you and your staff. It was a pleasure working with Dr. Jerry Rivera Wilson on this as well. And when we were talking about having this conversation, she asked me, she said, think of people that are really, that can speak about the hope, speak about what people can do as people are adjusting to this new normal. And as I was working with the team on this, and I was reflecting on, on my career, it's really been great to be a UAlbany alum, to be part of a community where you have professors who, take the time to find out about you and your career interests. I had an opportunity to serve as a UAlbany Council for Exceptional Children chapter president when I was working on my master's in special education. And it's just a really, really great environment in which to thrive. And over the course of my career, I've come across a number of servant leaders, and I think what we're going to find today is the panelists as well as open chair. So for some of you, the open chair concept is probably going to be a new one. So I'm going to briefly share what that concept is and how that can help you as you're moving forward in your career trajectory. So we have 3 open chairs today, and they are our special guests, participants, just like the majority of you who are on the call. But they're here as observers. We'll have an opportunity after the call to talk about their observations and recommendations regarding moving the work that we're talking about today forward. And it's really great to see them. Now, this concept, this open chair concept, is a concept that I picked up from someone that I've adopted as a mentor. Her name is Kathleen Caggiano Sino, and she's from the Research Foundation. And her motto is, when she developed this, I think maybe a couple of decades ago, is where there are 2 or more, there's an open chair. So please consider this in your life. If there are meetings where you want to invite people in so they can see what's going on, they can provide their expertise, and you can have this open dialogue. So our first open chair that I wanted to introduce is Maria Chow. Ms. Chow is the Senior Community Planner in the Federal Highway Administration of New York, the New York Division Office. And as part of her 12 career there, she's the lead planner, and she, along with the team, they administer $1.9 billion in assets. And so we're very, very fortunate to have her here as our first open chair. Lakeem Meadows is also open chairing today, and he is an Albany native. He's also a UAlbany alum. He is the assistant principal of School 2 here in Troy, and as part of his career trajectory, he's worked with a number of different agencies, particularly focusing on youth and families, and we're just so happy to have him here. He has a reputation as being a master planner and a statesman, so we're very honored to have him as well. And lastly, but definitely not least, we have Dr. Tahira Reed-Smith. She is an associate professor at Purdue University, and I've known Dr. Reed-Smith for over a decade. She is passionate. She always has keen, insightful questions. She, as part of her career trajectory, she has a degree in mechanical engineering from RPI. She completed her PhD in design science at the University of Michigan, and we welcome her as well. So that sets us up for our panelists. We have focal questions that we will be talking about today, and Dean Lane and I will be tag teaming on this. And what we have for you today is a pretty diverse panel. You'll find that we have panelists that cover essential areas in industry. We have a professor, and our first panelist is Stephen Curro, and he is a professor at Hudson Valley Community College. He is the managing director of construction at the Dormitory, and he has a reputation for being a very tough professor as well. I hear through the grapevine, very fair, and is not afraid of just being very hands-on with his students and bringing in, making that connection between industry and what is being taught crystal clear. As the director of construction at the Dormitory Authority, he has the onus for administering projects that have expenditures of between $600 million and $1 billion. So we welcome him as well. We also have Zilpa Odour. She is the coordinator of employment services for the U.S. Committee for Refugees and Immigrants. She is an Albright Fellow. And as an Albright Fellow, she helped develop and implement curricula there, and she is known for her international work, and locally she is a YMCA Black and Latino Youth Achiever Award recipient, so we welcome her as well. And our next panelist is Walter Porter. He is the Director of Business Development, Townsquare Media, and President of Inspired Marketing Solutions. He is very transparent of just how along his trajectory, how his faith has brought him through a courageous testimony of recovery from drugs and alcohol, and moving him to become a licensed cosmetologist and spa owner, where he owned his own business in Albany for a number of years, employing members of the community. And currently, he continues to employ folks as president of Inspired Entertainment Solutions, and he is also the director of new business development for Townsquare Media in Albany, so we welcome him. Caroline Saccone is representing Allied Health. She is a nursing instructor. One of the schools where she practices her trade is Hudson Valley Community College. She's a member of Sigma Theta Tau, and she's someone who has a heart for education, a heart for mentoring her students, and she, no doubt, is also known as someone who is tough and fair, but really wants to make sure that her students get it so that they can thrive in all that they do. And last but definitely not least, we have Sharon Sewell-Fearman. I've known Miss Sewell-Fearman for a number of years. It's always been an inspiration to me, and her expertise in workforce development, her leadership skills. As executive director of Workforce Professionals Training Institute, she leads the organization's overall strategic direction and growth, including strategic planning, funding diversification. I could go on and on about Sharon. She is passionate, she is dedicated, and she is someone that you can rely on to always have a word of encouragement and to be able to share her expertise. So that rounds out our panel. And I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation today. I believe that the participants on the call have access to the chat feature, so we're going to encourage folks to use that as well. And I know we're going to be tag teaming Dean Lane, so did you want me to start with the first question?
Well, sure, go for it.
Okay. All right, so we have 5 guiding questions, and the first one, basically, just as kind of a backdrop, and I'm going to ask any one of our panelists to share if you want to start us out. And the first one is every day we hear more and more about the pandemic, COVID-19 affecting the economy. How would you describe the new normal for anyone who they're seeking employment and they're trying to figure out, with all of the uncertainty going on, how can they move forward in meeting their career goals? Who would like to take that first question?
I can start if you like, Susan.
That would be great.
So as an employer, the Dormitory Authority We are in really the business of financing and constructing building projects for both New York State and New York City entities. And I can tell you that without question, the economy has changed. I mean, not just from the statistics. 3 months ago, unemployment was 3%. Now it's 13, 14, 15%. 3 months ago, we couldn't hire a construction professional. There were none out there. Today, everyone's knocking on our door with resumes. And of course, we have all kinds of hiring freezes in place. So, overnight, this whole scene has changed. But, as far as the new norm, certainly working from home has been quite interesting. We still have a number of our staff that need to report to project sites, but working from home presents its own set of challenges for sure. Everything from just trying to stay in touch with the folks that you work with and the organizations outside of your organization is a major challenge. I think the most significant change for me was recognizing that my workday was no longer 9 to 5. Your workday starts when you wake up and it ends when you go to bed. My phone, the number of emails and text messages has increased exponentially. There are no days off, and anyone seeking employment should buckle down and get ready for that, because it is no longer a 9 to 5 working world. And that, I think, for me, is the biggest change and what I would suggest folks be on the lookout for.
And
Thank you for that. Yeah, go ahead, please, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Thanks for that, Steve. And my, again, Sharon Soul-Fairman, and my organization, Workforce Professional Training Institute, is an intermediary nonprofit organization that trains and builds the capacity of organizations like Zilpa organization for those organizations who train and educate and prepare primarily low-income job seekers to connect to employment, right? And so I'm going to bring you a perspective from the workforce development space. And so when we talk about how do we describe the new normal, it's very interesting. COVID-19 has really changed the landscape, right? Stephen talked about, we went from 4% to double digits, like the highest spike in unemployment since the 1930s, right? But what COVID-19 has done is, with the social distance requirement, is really, really ushered in what we're now calling the distance economy and the digital age, right? I think before we knew that it was coming, but really, Stephen just talked about remote work. It's now distance economy, digital age. McKinsey just surveyed 200 organizations across, industry, and 90% of those executives said the fallout from COVID-19 has fundamentally changed the way business will be done over the next 5 years. And 30% of those executives do not feel very unprepared for what's coming, right? So just very quickly, remote work, right? In talking to businesses, many said they will have some kind of a hybrid when we go back to whatever normal is. At least 30% will be remote work, right? Especially in New York City, where I work. Artificial intelligence, we're seeing that AI now on the forefront. I'm gonna talk to you all a little bit later about Eightfold AI, which is a marketplace for talent exchange, right? And then there's automation. We see that COVID-19 social distances really affected face-to-face, employment opportunities. And so you're going to see a lot of entry-level jobs be automated. We're looking at organizations that are now looking at virtual operations versus our traditional brick and mortar. Even before the pandemic, we saw our favorite, or one of my favorite retail store closing, right? And that's Macy's. Like, they were moving a lot online. We're going to see more of that. We're seeing shift in business models, right? Because, retail, hospitality, the healthcare, telehealth is now a real thing, right? And so a shift in organizational culture. So as you're looking for jobs and thinking about jobs, it's not only skills, talents, and abilities, but it'll be a culture fit. And the one other thing that I want to say is that two other things, consumer behavior and patterns are shifting, right? And so business is shifting. In terms of looking for a job in the new normal, what I'm going to say, and I'm going to say it over and over again, is it has created a need for large-scale skilling, reskilling, and upskilling. Digital literacy and fluency is going to be very critical. Cognitive capability, the ability to problem solve, the ability to do critical thinking, the ability to be creative is going to be very paramount. Social and emotional skills. So we're going to have to be able to have things like empathy, be able to engage virtually, right? And then adaptability and resiliency. So self-confidence, is very critical. Things like how you're going to, Stephen just talked about boundaries, right? How do you set boundaries, right, when there are none? How do you engage with folks? How do you shift when the future is uncertain? So the ability to adapt and be resilient is going to be very important. And those are called no regret skills. So I'll pause there. I have a lot more to share, but I want to give an opportunity to my colleagues.
I'd like to jump in if I can. And thank you everyone for having me here. And thank you, Susan, of course, for inviting me. My company, Inspired Marketing Solutions, is an MWBE certified firm in several areas: New York State, New York City, the Port Authority, and a DBE, which is partially a federal government transportation type of certification. And what we have found in that process, and as she mentioned, I'm also the Director of New Business Development for Townsquare Media, which is a highly digital and social media sales company. People know us though for what's in the front line, which is our Hot 99, WGNA, ESPN, and some of the other stations that we have. Some of the things that I find, and thank you, Sharon, I think you were reading my notes.
We're on the same page.
The new norm in today's world, especially for students and also for teachers, is really working from the back end of the lens. For example, we would want to get a job based on our passion. And that's what we wanted to do. The old would be, I want to be a doctor because it makes sense to me. Well, as an MBE certified firm, one of the things that I realize is the importance is the need and not the passion. And so we have to make the need become our new passion. For example, one of the areas, as an example, in MWBE world is knowing how to get that bid. And getting the bid in today's day and age, if I had to look at it again, I would not go in with marketing certification. I go in and I sell toilet paper. Why? Because that's where a certification is not at this stage. And you have instant success with what happens. Now, in the simplicity, the way it sounds like, well, okay, I'm going to do that. But when you really look at it, when you remove the passion, just like in business, we have to remove the emotion. We have to look at the things that have become more prevalent. I remember people would say to kids, get away from the video game. Well, guess what? One of the biggest areas right now is gaming. Knowing the back end of digital and not knowing the front end of digital. Knowing the back end of social media and not knowing the front end of social media. I probably have the hardest time posting, but I can tell you the algorithms of the back of a website and the algorithms of the back of social media. Those are the things that we have to think about when we think of the need in this new normal. This new normal that we have is not really new, because when you think about it, it's tragedy that brings about the new things that we do and the change of the environment. We are living, for those who might be as old as I am, in the Jetson generation. Never thought that we would see that, or at least I didn't, and I'm still interested to see the car come off the ground in front of my house. I know that they have the protocols, but we really need to think about the simplicity of, I like to call it the passion of the need. And Sharon briefly mentioned that when she talked about knowing that the digital revolution is actually in front of us. It's here. Knowing how to analyze data and behaviors is very important in today's day and age. And, you know, striving businesses are emerging out of tragedy. We have to change the infrastructure. I'm on a project now out of California where they are a PPE company and they were doing small business, and then COVID hit and their business was so big, but what they realized is that their infrastructure wasn't prepared for what was to come. And so we're redoing the infrastructure. We're looking at, in teaching, we really have to listen to our students to determine how to give them guidance to move forward. Because when they engage in the public, they have to know how to have synergy with the people that they're dealing with. The technical knowledge is very important, but the socialization of that knowledge to who they're dealing with becomes equally important. And I believe that a lot more business training, internships need to happen in order to be helpful to the students going in the workforce, because there's a gap from the time they get to school to the time that they're actually doing work. And so we need to look at where we're going. We're used to looking at history, but I liken it to a tree. A big tree has big roots in the ground, but the leaves are so much different now. When the leaves grow, you might even see a red leaf grow out of where normally it would be a green leaf. And so we have to look at what's to come and not what's here. And I think, and embrace it. We need to embrace it and not be afraid of it. And so when we look at those avenues, we have a positive outlook on what the new normal would actually be. And as Sharon said, I'd like to pass it on to my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you for that. This is a really, really great start. And Walter, that was a really great segue as we continue to, you know, to have this conversation into the second question. You talked about, you know, teaching and teachers, you know, being mindful of student needs, which of course, you know, is something that we want to make sure that we're highlighting. Can you, and I open it up to other panelists too. I know we're going to hear from Zilpa and the work that you do with students who are who've been uprooted from other countries, and they're here and they're just trying to make, you know, just make sense of the culture that appears to be shifting. You know, as Walter was talking about, you know, we're talking about the new normal, but whenever you have, you know, you have what can be described as traumatic change, that you need to employ the skills that Steve and Sharon were talking about, and Walter also added to flexibility, being able to be digitally savvy. If you're, I'm just putting on my special education hat on here. When you're working with students who may be coming from other countries with special needs, or maybe they don't have special needs, but they're coming and they're transplanted and they're trying to make sense of the economy, trying to make sense of how they fit in. What type of advice or guidance, Zilpa, do you think people, maybe like a couple of things that people should walk away from this conversation keeping in mind?
Certainly. I know one of the things we've been thinking about as an office is, we meeting students where they are. And that is one thing that if there's any kind of piece of advice I'll give, folks, teachers, especially as they work with students, is meeting the students where they are, because we know that for our clients, especially who are refugees and immigrants, living in the age of COVID, especially in America, right? Sharon was talking about how the things we need are digital literacy, and, like technology is kind of the era of the day, or the, the order of the day. But, we work with folks who are usually serving bottom rung in the service industry. So many of them are now the essential workers who are still trying to navigate what it means to operate in a landscape where they're still, I guess, required to be remote somehow or distant somehow, and, provide for their families and all of that. But being able to have, for one, access to the platforms they're already using. We used to have face-to-face classes, and that was the best way because there was a lot of interpretation involved. But now it's, migrating everybody into WhatsApp, because that's what everybody is using, having groups designed by languages, having a broadcast group and having, interpreters kind of send audio files back and forth so that people can be able to understand. In addition to that, maybe trying to prepare videos using PowerPoint, using the basic things in ways we never thought possible, right? Knowing that you can record lectures or classes via PowerPoint and sending that out to people because it's an accessible way to do it is also, something that has been able to work for us pretty effectively, because we realize that, sometimes the most simplest things are usually the best ones, right? Not everybody knows how to use Zoom. You see the link, but still some people can't click onto that. So, I would encourage, especially teachers, for one, to meet students where they are and have conversations about a lot of what is happening, and listen to the anxiety that a lot of people have, because as a society, as a community, we are going through collective grief. We're going through one of probably the largest economic downturns in our lifetimes. And that's a huge thing. Many people are anxious about their livelihoods. And also a lot of people are trying to understand how to cope in now a world that is also trying to figure itself out with racial injustice. That too is a huge part, and it's going to change the landscape of how we thought about business, how we thought about, Walter was talking about like algorithms, even technology companies are coming out and saying, there was inherent bias there. So thinking about how we can integrate a lot of the social movements into, the structure of people trying to integrate into the workforce, trying to participate into the economy, trying to create ways to provide services to people.
Public speaking is, we talk about Zoom, and there's so much shyness to public speaking. I think that that's an area that really needs to flourish in a big, big way. I know we have a class or two for public speaking in most universities. However, it's really a platform that stands out more because of Zoom, having etiquette with doing Zoom meetings. Some of these things are equally important for teaching, if that could help.
Oh, thank you. Great conversation.
Let me pick up on something there.
Oh, no, please.
And Zilpa, you talked about Zoom, and Walter, you talked about public speaking, and in many ways it highlights the increasing reliance on the digital platforms, right, that we're on, whether it's WebEx or Zoom or Teams or whatever that might be. But to be engaged in those conversations, you have to have access to the technology. Right? And we know that COVID-19, particularly in the learning environment, has already accentuated the digital divide that exists within this country. But as I think about career development and those who looking for careers or wanting to be involved, and Stephen, you talked about being at home more, right? Be able to work at home, you got to have the technology to be able to work at home, right? And be able to connect. And so your thoughts on sort of how the digital divide is playing out and how career seekers, those who might be looking to get back into the game, who have been hit by COVID, might be able to overcome or think about overcoming this digital divide that might exist that creates another barrier for them.
What was shocking for me as an instructor, we're kind of bumping along in the spring semester of 2020, and life is good. We're very comfortable in our face-to-face, instruction environment. And all of a sudden, spring break hits, and Hudson Valley says, we're going to have a second week of spring break, and when you return, everything you do will be online. And, there's a bunch of crusty old teachers like myself who, we had no idea even where to begin. We had to learn a platform called Blackboard, and in 2 weeks, I had to put 2 technology courses up. And things that go through my mind at the time were frankly not the right things to be thinking about. I'm sitting at my computer at home and I'm moving content onto Blackboard, but I'm not thinking about the student and the fact that most of my students don't even have a home PC. They're going to be working from home using an iPhone. And, I had to really shift my whole way of thinking and put myself in the student's shoes and understand from a technology standpoint, what resources do they have? What resources don't they have? What am I taking for granted? So it wasn't just the shift to, the online learning. It was, what do these students have to be able to do this? And Hudson Valley was gracious in offering the students laptops and other types of devices to be able to work from home. But I'll tell you, it was quite an eye-opener for me to really, for once, truly put myself in the shoes of the kids and try to deal with what I think I had taken for granted. And that's everybody has a PC, everybody has an internet connection. Everybody knows how to use Zoom and Teams and Google Meet and everything else. And frankly, that wasn't the case. And the biggest challenge, I think, was I wanted the kids to not have to think about technology. I wanted them to be able to just concentrate on the course content and learn what they signed up for and what they paid for. It is such a shift. And we continue to put classes up online. And, I think I've learned a little bit from that. I'm getting ready for the fall semester. I'm putting 2 courses up. I'm teaching a summer course. I had a couple weeks to put online. I'm doing a lot more development, understanding where these kids are coming from. So that being said, I'll just leave with this. I think that, and Walter said it well, internships, co-ops, pushing these kids to create their own business. I mean, even if it's a lawn mowing business over the summer, the skills these kids can learn from having their own small business, are just, there's nothing that prepares you more for the workforce than an internship, a co-op, owning your own small business, or getting your kids to visit businesses. We go up to Dimension Fabricators, we go up to Stonebridge Iron and Steel, we walk these kids through the plants, their eyes light up. It's so much better than sitting in the classroom. And I'm a classroom guy.
So, no, I think a really great point. Let me pivot now and bring Caroline into the conversation, also an instructor in this space, and maybe to sort of pick up where Stephen left off and talk a little about what you've experienced in all of this.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Susan, for inviting me to this. Our biggest challenge as a nursing instructor, and I'm very fortunate to teach at 3 different colleges. At Hudson Valley, as Stephen said, it was wonderful. They were really very supportive, but we are not only didactic, but we are also hands-on. So as teaching someone how to be a nurse, distance learning has been very, very difficult. I think the students have adapted to different ways of practicing their skills. But as Stephen said, one of the colleges I work with, I do online testing now, hands-on testing remotely. And we really want the students to focus on their skills, not on the technology. And unfortunately, when they go to sign in and log in, if they have technological problems, that's almost sets them up for failure, because now their anxiety has risen so high. Instead of focusing on their exam, their hands-on skills exam, now it's been 45 minutes of trying to log in and problems, and my heart breaks for them. And then depending on where I teach, it's different. Hudson Valley tends to be more local, and my students seem to be a little older. I teach at Excelsior College, where it's more global. And so I have a lot of people that do not have access to computers. And when we talk about that, we also have to keep in mind, we tend to think of just a student, but there are students that are single parents that are home with children, other adversities that are very, very difficult to their learning as well. And I think that's a huge problem. We tend to forget that it's not just a student. Where are the support systems? They go to school and their children are being taken care of or being watched, but now it's all on them. And I find it very, very difficult for them to have to manage it all.
It's a great point. Sharon, you're working with folks who are making transitions and getting into careers. How are you seeing this digital divide play out?
Thanks for that. I agree with all that my fellow panelists have said. And the bottom line is there is a huge digital divide, especially in underserved communities, where it's not only the equipment, but it is access to broadband, right? And, Wi-Fi subscriptions. And so I think, what I would encourage is whether you're a student, a parent, or faculty, to the advocacy around policies and investment in broadband and Wi-Fi access is really important. There is a digital divide in terms of just, we talked about people being out of the labor market, for a while. In some ways, young people, the emerging sort of labor force, can adapt very quickly. But again, it's the tools and the resources for them to make that shift. For folks who have been out of the workforce, I think it's important to access things like Grow with Google. They have completely free resources around, how do you do your digital resume? How do you use digital applications? It's completely free. Also, I would suggest going on to Eightfold AI, just to really look at, how people are posting their resumes and what are companies looking for, right? The other thing is, what we encourage our providers to do is to have job seekers, do informational interviews, right? And really understand what's happening with the industries, what's changing, what are the occupations, right? And again, it comes back to the what we call the soft skills and the no regret skills, right? It's really thinking about sharpening your communication skills, both written and verbal, right? It's about adaptation and resiliency, right? It is about social and emotional engagement. So really thinking about those things, and then on top of that, looking at, again, the digital skills. So, so I think it's going to be you know, Susan said, I'm always optimistic. You know, I am. It's a great opportunity for us to retool our skills, but there's also going to be strong competition. Now with remote work and learning, you literally, your colleague can be across the country, right? And so it's really thinking about what's your project you know, we encourage them, like, take a project management class, right? Because project management is going to be really critical. So things like that, we're really encouraging folks to do, whether it's young adults or incumbent workers, to really look at how you do things differently, and don't be afraid to really, you know, LinkedIn, all the social media platforms, it's a way to connect. I've had people reach out to me and just ask, hey, what's happening in your industry? What are the occupations? What are the skill set? And another big thing is, what's the culture fit? Because now that we're doing remote work, the culture fit is very different, right? It looks very different in terms of how we interact.
No, excellent points. And, you know, as we've been having this conversation around, you know, whether you're currently employed or you're part of, I was just looking at Department of Labor stat that there are 20% fewer people employed, you know, in June than June of last year. And so what does that mean, you know, for people who are, you know, looking to move forward in their career trajectory? And the conversation we've been having, you know, Caroline and the group talking about, you know, us being as either as mentors or teachers or administrators, just making sure that we have an environment where people can access the skills that they need and access the information that they need, and we can help form that community. Zilpa, I know when you were talking that, you know, you really stressed in terms of making sure that people are building these social networks. I was following the chat and I saw some chat around building social networks. You know, you have 5 certifications, and, you know, and you're ready to go into the next level in terms of your educational career or career as an educator. And in school districts across the country are dealing with budget crises, and you see different crises unfold in a number of different agencies, different industries. Although we know that construction is essential, you know, hospitality is essential, allied health is essential, IT is essential. But, you know, being able to break into the, you know, into the culture and informational interviewing, as Sharon had talked about, is really great. This open chair concept is something else that people might want to explore as well. And I think this is a good place to, I think we've already kind of hit some of the high notes around questions 3 and 4 in terms of, you know, what advice would you give to someone who is looking for opportunities to retool? We've been talking quite a bit about that, about soft skills and seeking information. We've also been talking about cultural competency and, you know, being attuned to, you know, working, you know, globally. You know, you're working remotely, so you'll have a colleague from, you know, may have a colleague from a totally different culture and background. And so what does that mean in terms of us having courageous conversations around race, around culture, around differing, you know, perspectives? I'm going to move to question 4. Crisis creates turbulence in the system, which can wreak havoc on current careers as well as new opportunities. As you consider the future, what new career opportunities may emerge from the current crisis? What suggestions would you have people consider as they're looking to prepare for the future of work? I think we've touched on this. We've talked about this a little bit. I can't believe this hour is going by so quickly. And we knew this was going to happen, particularly with such a dynamic panel. But wanted to give folks an opportunity to weigh in on that. And I'm actually, Zilpa, I'm gonna toss this to you if you don't mind me putting you on the spot for a little bit.
So I think for one, I'm going to talk about the service industry because that's the one that I believe has been most disrupted, but there's also a lot of room for growth in this way, right? And pairing that, especially with tech. I think a lot of the conversations I've seen have to do with people creating apps to give people access to a service, right? That has already been happening, but that's gonna, exponentially increase. More people are gonna be creating apps. More people are gonna wanna figure out, how can I get people to buy what I'm selling? And that's the best way in a distance economy. I also think that, I guess one of my suggestions too, kind of going on to the tail end of the question, is that, if you can, people say Google is free, and that is probably going to be your best friend when trying to retool while trying to learn, right? There's, if we are able to have, if people have good policy, as Susan was saying, and there's access to broadband, I would really encourage people to take the time to actually access, Google. Now there's Coursera, edX, places where you can get certifications for one, to increase your value, but also just your knowledge. You can think differently about how you think, right? There's a structure, a way of thinking called design thinking, for people to be able to design products and services to meet community needs. So I think when people engage with different stakeholders, ask and reassess on what the community is going through, and be willing to have those conversations, people will be able to figure out what, is in high demand, so that they can prosper in that way. Yeah.
No, thank you. No, excellent. As we're just keeping an eye on the time here, Walter, could you talk a little bit more about your experiences with mentoring people as they've been, retooling around, particularly the industry of business and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, there's a separation with business and the actual work. And I believe when engaging into the workforce, the business of the business is eliminated. And that is the most important part when you're talking about merging and communicating with customers, with business owners. You really have to understand that, to take the technical skill that you have and communicate it in a knowledge that makes sense to answer their question. And their question is real simple: what's in it for me? That's all they really want. And if you can take your technical knowledge and merge that in, well, a lot of that information, when I find interns and people coming out of school, is missed. And as a result of that, you find that those people who went to school for 4 to 8 years, and they get an opportunity to get the job in their field, they feel a little lost, because they wonder, how did you do that? That's not what they taught me in school. And so a lot of the business nature of the field that they're in also needs to be stressed. I know in the marketing world, we have people who are coming in and they learn a lot about social media. And who would think that social media would have been a class? It is. And when they come in, they have everything about the posting, but they don't know a lot about the data and and if they do, they don't communicate it where there's an understanding. So I think a lot of the simplicity of business itself, in whatever field it is, also needs to be discussed, because I think that's what lacks. And when I give it to them, I like when you said the 2 professors were tough. I give it to them with tough love, because that's the only way that they get shaken up, so that they see what's going on and they change. And even though it comes with tough love, they're very thankful to that, because they do want to succeed. I want to touch for a second on the technology, and we were talking about Google and some of the other things. The fact of the matter is, if you don't know how to use technology, ask a young person. They'll tell you how to do it. Mm-hmm. They'll tell you right away. how to use, I don't think I've used 25% of the things that are on my telephone, but they use 75% of the things that are on the telephone. I agree that what's lacking are the resources, and I think all the way up to government, those are the things that should be important with curriculum. We say that you have to have this book or that book. I think the thought that they have to have broadband and that they have to have Wi-Fi and they have to have certain things from the time that they start school is important now. That should be part of what's necessary in order to get into the class. And I know that that's not a, there are people at different levels, and I know that it's harder to say, but I think that resources need to be provided for that. And I just wanted to touch in on that as well.
No, thank you. And I'm wondering if this might be a good time to pause for, closing thoughts and to maybe to give each panelist opportunity just to, share briefly, just kind of like if there's like one concept, one takeaway that you'd like folks to leave with before we close. If you could share that. I'm just going to ask, maybe we could start with Steve and then continue to move forward.
Thanks. Thanks for having me on the panel. I appreciate it. And hopefully the audience is gaining from today's discussion. Frankly, I've learned a lot from the other panelists, which is always good. And that's really my parting shot. We can never stop learning. I really didn't know a whole lot about that Blackboard platform, but I can tell you I can almost teach it with my eyes closed right now. And even for us older folks, it is great to learn something new. So, I would encourage everybody in the audience to seek ways to learn something new and set yourself up and set your students up, for what we have no idea what's coming. I'll leave you with that.
All right, excellent. Zilpa?
Just to echo what Stephen said, is that we have no idea what's coming, but we must, be willing to take the risk in engaging with that discomfort. I'm very hopeful that, we're moving in a direction where people are having the important conversations around, access and equity and better for our society as a whole. And I hope that those conversations can continue. I hope that for those looking for work, you can also think of ways to be innovative. I think that, as Walter was saying earlier, there is, the difference between putting in the work and a difference in the business, right? So I hope that as you are thinking about putting in the work, you can also think about creative ways to engage with business, to engage with your community, to engage with your network. One of the most foolproof things is, your network, the people that you are really a collection of the people that you know. So being able to tap into those folks and engaging with them in what you think the future is going to look like, what you hope your future to look like, and how you would like to see, the world advance for the better. Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure being on this panel with you all. Thank you.
Dean Lane, do we have a couple more minutes to wrap up?
Yeah, we can give folks a couple minutes if we want all their concluding thoughts. We don't want to leave those nuggets go.
All right, awesome. Mr. Porter.
Well, I will say we need to listen to our youth. They hold the future. We need to remove the listen to me statement and just listen. And to the youth and those who are learning, I say explore, research, and explain, and eliminate the I don't know attitude. We really can learn any and everything. And I also thank everyone for giving me the opportunity to communicate my thoughts. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Professor Saccone.
Thank you, Susan, and everyone. It was great meeting you all. I think what I want everyone to take away from this is just to be open-minded to everything that's to come. I think a lot of this is still unknown. We never know what's going to be around the corner. I think things are changing on a day-to-day basis, as we all know. So we have to continue to be open-minded and not get frustrated on the day-to-day changes that seem to occur. I think it's time for us to use our critical thinking skills to think outside the box, and again, to be open to what's coming. I thank you all.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Director Sewell Fearman.
Thank you. I would say that, I started the top of the hour with, we've moved into the digital age, and we talked about technology and how it's changing things. Just remember, at the heart of that is the human component. And the bottom line is technology will make us, more efficient, faster, all of that. But to the point what Susan said, and I'll repeat this, in terms of the no regret skills, it's really important that we think about, what's our cognitive skills, that critical thinking, that problem solving, that creativity, the communications, how do we communicate in new ways? Interpersonal skills, how do we relate to people? Adaptability and resiliency. There's uncertainty, and there's probably going to be uncertainty for a number of years. Typically, the economy takes 4 to 5 years to come back. Compounded with that is the pandemic. And so that really changes the way we do business. And so the ability to adapt and to be resilient is really, really essential. And at the heart of it, I have a great intern in our office, Greg Bodie, and Gregory, he just graduated from school, and he really pushes us. He asks questions. He's very inquisitive, and he pushes us to think outside the box. And I think as students, I remember when I graduated, I was like, wow, this world is a big place, and where do I start? But what I really valued was pushing people. Why do you do it that way? Why things change? How could you do it differently? And I think that is really key to success going forward. So don't look at it as a pessimistic future, but an opportunistic future where you can bring creativity and solution to some of the challenges that's before us. So thank you all for having me on this panel. I really appreciate it, and I hope that we all leave with some nugget that will be valuable to you all as you go forward.
Well, there is no doubt there will be lots of nuggets, and that was a great one to end on. My thanks to all of you for being part of this conversation today, a very important conversation, and one that's going to be ongoing for some time to come. Deep, deep thanks to Dr. Perkins and to Dr. Rivera-Wilson for their work in both visioning and setting up this entire panel and making it a reality. So with that, we have come past our hour, but we thank you all for being with us today, and we'll be sharing this broadly on our website and via social media as well, so that others will have an opportunity to listen to your wisdom. With that, be well, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Dr.